I was standing in front of my house, the one I had worked 2 jobs for 6 years to buy, when the envelope from the courthouse arrived. This was my pride, my proof that I had made something of myself. I always thought owning a home would finally make my parents proud of me. But when I opened that envelope and saw their names listed as plaintiffs, my whole world shattered. My own parents were suing me for my house. Before I get into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. What I discovered during that lawsuit changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Let me tell you how it all started. My hands were shaking as I read through the legal documents. The words blurred together at first, but slowly the reality sank in. My parents, Gerald and Patricia, were claiming that they had made financial contributions to my home purchase through raising me and supporting me throughout my childhood. They argued that because of their sacrifices, they deserved recognition of 50% ownership of my property. The reason my younger brother Dylan needed a fresh start, and they believed my house should be part of that solution. I had to read it 3 times before I could accept what I was seeing. These were not strangers. These were the people who brought me into this world. And here they were, dragging me to court over the home I had earned with my own sweat and sacrifice. I sat down on my front porch, the papers crumpling slightly in my grip. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my lawn, the lawn I mowed every weekend, the lawn that belonged to me because I had paid for every single blade of grass on it. And now my parents wanted to take half of it away and give it to Dylan. My mind drifted back to my childhood, to all the moments that should have warned me this day would come. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never caused trouble. Dylan was different. He was charming, handsome, the kind of kid who could talk his way out of anything. And my parents adored him for it. I remember when I was 12 and Dylan was 8. He broke my bicycle, the one I had saved up allowance money for an entire year to buy. He was riding it without permission, crashed it into a tree, and bent the front wheel beyond repair. When I complained to my parents, my father looked at me with disappointment and said, "You should learn to share Trevor. He is your little brother. Family looks out for each other." Family looks out for each other. That phrase echoed through my childhood like a curse. When I turned 16, Dylan got the keys to my father's old sedan. It was not new, but it was a car, a symbol of freedom and trust. On my 16th birthday, I received a cake and $50. My mother said they could not afford to give me more. 2 years later, they bought Dylan a brand new pickup truck. College was the same story. I got accepted with a partial scholarship, but there was still a gap to cover. I asked my parents for help, just enough to cover the difference. My father shook his head. "We do not have that kind of money, son. You will have to figure it out yourself." So I did. I worked part-time jobs, took out loans, and graduated with debt that took me years to pay off. Meanwhile, Dylan dropped out of community college after 1 semester, and my parents never said a word about the tuition they had wasted on him. But there was one person who saw me, who truly understood what I was going through. My grandmother Eleanor, my mother's mother, was the only family member who treated me with unconditional love. She would visit on weekends when my parents were too busy fussing over Dylan, and she would sit with me on the back porch listening to my dreams and fears. "I see you, Trevor," she used to say, her wrinkled hand patting mine gently. "I always have." Before she passed away when I was 19, she told me she had set up a trust fund for me. $80,000, she said, specifically for my first home. It was her way of giving me a head start, of making sure I had something that was truly mine. But I never saw a penny of that money. When I turned 25, the age when the trust was supposed to transfer to me, I asked my parents about it. My mother's face went blank for a moment before she recovered. "The trust is gone, Trevor. Management fees, taxes, it all added up. There is nothing left." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that my own mother would not lie to me about something so important. So I swallowed my doubts and moved on. I told myself that I would build my future without any help, just like I had always done. After the initial shock of reading the lawsuit wore off, I picked up my phone and called my mother. I needed to understand. I needed to hear from her own lips why they were doing this to me. She answered on the third ring, her voice cool and measured. "Trevor, I was wondering when you would call." "Mom, what is this, a lawsuit? You're actually taking me to court over my house." There was a pause on the other end. "Dylan needs this more than you do. You have a good job, a stable income. He has nothing. He is going through a divorce, he lost his job, he has debts. You could help him, but you refuse. So we had to take matters into our own hands." "Help him, Mom. I offered to let him stay in my old apartment when he first got divorced, and he trashed the place. He threw parties, broke the furniture, and left me with a $2,000 repair bill. And you expect me to just hand over half my house? You always hold grudges, Trevor. That is your problem. You never learn to forgive." I could feel my blood pressure rising. This is not about grudges. This is about accountability. Dylan has never taken responsibility for anything in his life, and you and Dad have always bailed him out. When does it end? The phone rustled, and suddenly my father's voice came through. "Trevor, a real man, takes care of his family. He does not turn his back on blood. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." That sentence hit me like a punch to the gut. My grandmother, the only person who had ever truly loved me without conditions, and he was using her memory against me. "Do not talk about Grandma," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You do not have the right." "We have every right. We are your parents, and we raised you better than this." I ended the call without saying goodbye. Then I sat in the darkness of my living room, and for the first time since my grandmother's funeral, I cried. The next morning, I knew I needed legal help. I could not face this alone. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I had not thought about in years, Marcus Webb. We had been roommates in college back before life pulled us in different directions. He had gone on to become a lawyer, and from what I had heard, a good one. I called him, explained the situation, and he agreed to meet me that afternoon. His office was downtown, a modest space in a building that had seen better days, but Marcus himself looked sharp and confident. He listened as I laid out the whole story from the lawsuit to my childhood to my grandmother's trust fund. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against his desk. "The lawsuit itself is weak," he said. "They have no legal claim to your property. You bought it with your own money. Your name is on the mortgage, and there is no evidence of any financial contribution from them. But these cases can drag on, cost you time and money, and cause a lot of stress." "So, what do I do?" Marcus paused, his eyes narrowing. "You mentioned a trust fund. $80,000 that your grandmother left you. What happened to it?" "My parents said it was gone. Management fees and taxes, they claimed." "Trevor, trust funds do not just disappear. The fees are usually minimal, especially for a fund that size. Something does not add up." He leaned forward. "Do you have any documentation, any records at all?" I shook my head. I never asked to see the paperwork. I trusted them. Marcus nodded slowly. "Let me look into this. If there is something there, we might be able to use it." Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus worked his magic. He filed requests with the bank that had managed the trust-submitted paperwork to access historical records and navigated the bureaucratic maze that I never could have handled on my own. While we waited, my life became a nightmare. Dylan, never one to miss an opportunity for drama, took to social media. He posted long emotional rants about how I was a selfish monster who was tearing the family apart. He painted himself as the victim, the loving brother who just wanted a second chance, while I was the cold-hearted villain hoarding my wealth. The posts went viral within our extended family. Suddenly, my phone was ringing off the hook. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I had not spoken to in years, all calling to tell me what a disappointment I was. My Aunt Barbara, my mother's sister, was the worst. She called me one evening, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "Trevor, I cannot believe what you are doing to your parents." After everything they sacrificed for you, this is how you repay them. You are breaking your mother's heart." I tried to explain my side, but she would not listen. In her mind, the narrative was already set. I was the bad guy, and nothing I said could change that. The stress started affecting my work. I made mistakes, missed deadlines, found myself staring at my computer screen for hours without accomplishing anything. Sleep became a distant memory replaced by nights of tossing and turning, replaying every argument, every accusation. One night, desperate for some connection to happier times, I dug out an old box of keepsakes from my grandmother. It was filled with photographs, letters, and small trinkets she had given me over the years. Near the bottom, I found an envelope with my name written in her elegant script. Inside was a letter dated just a few months before she passed away. My hands trembled as I read her words. "My dearest Trevor, I know your parents do not always show it, but I want you to know that you are loved. You are seen. I have set aside money for you specifically for you because I know they will not be fair. This money is for your first home, a place that is truly yours. I have kept copies of all the trust documents with my lawyer, Mr. Harold Preston. If anything ever seems wrong, go to him. He will have the truth. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor." A lawyer. She had left copies with a lawyer. A lawyer I had never known about. The next morning, I showed the letter to Marcus. His eyes widened as he read it. "This changes everything. If her lawyer still has those records, we might be able to prove exactly what happened to that money." It took another 2 weeks to track down Harold Preston. He had retired several years ago, but his old firm still had the records in storage. When Marcus finally obtained the documents, we sat in his office and went through them together. What we found made my blood run cold. The trust fund had been real. $80,000, just as my grandmother had promised, deposited into an account with my parents named as trustees until I turned 25. The terms were clear. The money was to be used solely for my benefit, specifically for the purchase of my first home. But the withdrawal records told a different story. Over the course of 6 years from when I was 19 until I was 25, my parents had systematically drained the entire account. Every dollar, every single cent. $15,000 withdrawn when Dylan needed to pay off gambling debts. $20,000 when Dylan went through his divorce. $25,000 when Dylan lost his job and needed to cover living expenses. $20,000 more for various family expenses that were never specified. Not one penny had ever been used for me. Not one. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the signatures of my parents authorizing each withdrawal. The evidence was irrefutable. They had stolen my inheritance and given it all to Dylan. "They lied to me," I whispered. "All these years they looked me in the eye and lied." Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard, but Trevor, this gives us leverage. Significant leverage." I nodded slowly, my grief hardening into something else. Something colder. Something determined. They wanted to take my house. Fine. They wanted to drag me to court. Fine. But they had no idea what was coming. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of preparation. Marcus and I met almost every day going over our strategy, rehearsing my testimony, anticipating every possible argument the other side might make. We made a decision early on we would not reveal the trust fund evidence until we were in the courtroom. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them believe their lies would go unchallenged. The night before the trial, I sat alone in my living room holding my grandmother's letter. Her words gave me strength, reminded me of who I was and what I was fighting for. This was not about the money anymore. It was about the truth. It was about my dignity. It was about finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of being overlooked and undervalued. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lights that gave everything a harsh, clinical feel. I sat at one table with Marcus. Across the aisle, my parents and Dylan sat with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. My mother would not look at me. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Dylan fidgeted nervously, picking at his fingernails. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order and asked the plaintiffs to present their case. Their lawyer stood and launched into his argument. He painted a picture of a loving family who had sacrificed everything for their eldest son. He spoke of late nights and hard work of parents who gave up their own dreams so their children could succeed. And now, he said, when the family needed Trevor's help, he had turned his back on them. My mother took the stand next. Tears streamed down her face as she described how heartbroken she was, how all she wanted was for the family to be united again. "I just want my boys to love each other," she sobbed. "Is that too much to ask?" My father followed his voice gruff with emotion. He talked about family values, about tradition, about how he had always taught his sons to take care of one another. "Trevor has forgotten where he came from," he said. "He has forgotten what family means." Through it all, I sat still, my face expressionless. Marcus had coached me well. Do not react. Do not show emotion. Our time would come. When it was finally our turn, Marcus stood calmly and began dismantling their arguments piece by piece. He presented my bank records showing the $45,000 I had saved over 6 years of working 2 jobs. He showed the mortgage documents with only my name on them. He presented pay stubs, tax returns, and financial statements that proved beyond any doubt that I had purchased my home entirely on my own. Then it was my turn to take the stand. I spoke slowly, carefully, letting my words sink in. I told the court about working double shifts at the warehouse and nights at the grocery store. I told them about the cold dinners I ate alone because I was too exhausted to cook. I told them about asking my parents for help with college tuition and being told there was no money. "I built my life from nothing," I said. "Everything I have I earned myself. My parents never gave me a dime." I could see my mother shifting uncomfortably in her seat. My father's face was turning red. Marcus approached the bench. "Your Honor, we would like to present additional evidence that is directly relevant to this case." Judge Harrison nodded. "Proceed." Marcus handed copies of the trust fund documents to the judge, to the opposing counsel, and to the court reporter. Then he turned to face my parents. "These documents show that Eleanor Patterson, the deceased grandmother of the defendant, established a trust fund of $80,000 for her grandson, Trevor. The funds were to be held until he turned 25, at which point they were to be released to him for the purchase of his first home." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The documents also show that Gerald and Patricia Patterson, the plaintiffs in this case, were named as trustees of this fund. And the bank records clearly indicate that over a period of 6 years, they withdrew the entire $80,000. Marcus walked slowly toward the plaintiff's table, holding up the withdrawal records. $15,000 in April of 2015, coinciding with Dylan Patterson's gambling debts. $20,000 in September of 2018 during Dylan Patterson's divorce proceedings. $25,000 in March of 2020 when Dylan Patterson lost his employment. And an additional $20,000 at various points for unspecified family expenses. He turned to face the judge. Not a single dollar of this trust fund was ever used for Trevor Patterson's benefit. Every cent was given to his brother Dylan. The courtroom went silent. I looked at my parents for the first time since the proceedings began. My mother's face had gone pale, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking garish against her ashen skin. My father sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, no words coming out. And Dylan, my charming, irresponsible little brother, had his head bowed so low his chin nearly touched his chest. He could not look at anyone. Judge Harrison studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable. "Is there anything the defendant would like to add?" I stood up, my legs steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "Your Honor, I would just like to say this." I turned to face my parents directly. "You took the money that Grandma left for me. You took every single dollar and gave it to Dylan. And now you are suing me for the house that I bought with my own sweat and blood, claiming that you deserve half of it." My voice did not waver. My eyes did not leave theirs. I spent my whole life trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough, trying to make you proud. But I understand now that nothing I do will ever be enough for you. And that is not my fault. That is yours. I sat back down. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The opposing lawyer requested a recess, but Judge Harrison denied it. She had seen enough. After reviewing all the evidence presented, she said this court finds no merit in the plaintiff's claims. The defendant, Trevor Patterson, is the sole legal owner of the property in question. The plaintiffs have provided no evidence of financial contribution to the purchase of said property. She paused, her gaze settling on my parents. Furthermore, the evidence presented regarding the trust fund raises serious questions about the plaintiffs' conduct as trustees. While this is a matter for a separate civil proceeding, I would advise the defendant that he has grounds to pursue legal action for the recovery of those funds. She brought down her gavel. Case dismissed. I did not feel joy. I did not feel triumph. I just felt empty. My parents and Dylan left the courtroom without a word, without a glance in my direction. I watched them go, these people who were supposed to be my family walking out of my life. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Trevor." I nodded, but I could not speak. I just stood there in the empty courtroom looking up at the ceiling, thinking about my grandmother and wondering if she could see me now. The weeks after the trial were the hardest of my life. I had won, but it did not feel like victory. I had lost my family, or maybe I had finally acknowledged that I never really had one to begin with. I spent a lot of time alone in my house, the house I had fought so hard to keep. But the rooms felt emptier now, the silence heavier. I questioned myself constantly. Had I done the right thing? Should I have just given in, kept the peace, sacrificed my own needs for the sake of family harmony? But then I would remember my grandmother's letter, her faith in me, her belief that I deserved something of my own. And I knew that I had honored her memory by standing up for myself. Sleep came slowly when it came at all. But one night I dreamed of her. She was sitting on the back porch of her old house, the one she sold before she got sick, and she was smiling at me. "I am proud of you, Trevor," she said in the dream. "I always knew you had it in you." I woke up with tears on my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release. I made a decision after that. I would not sue my parents for the trust fund money. Not because they deserved my mercy, but because I did not want to carry that bitterness with me for the rest of my life. Chasing after that money would mean staying connected to them, staying trapped in their orbit. I needed to break free completely. Instead, I took the money I had set aside for a potential lawsuit and used it to establish a small scholarship fund in my grandmother's name at my old high school. It was not much, but it was something. A way to honor her legacy, to help some other kid who might be struggling the way I once did. I started seeing a therapist too. For the first time in my life, I talked openly about my childhood, about feeling unseen and unloved, about always being second best. It was painful at first digging up all those old wounds, but slowly I began to heal. I learned that my parents' inability to love me properly was not a reflection of my worth. It was a limitation in them, not a flaw in me. I reconnected with old friends, people I had pushed away during those years of working myself to the bone. They welcomed me back without judgment, and I realized how much I had missed genuine human connection. And then there was Sarah. She worked at a coffee shop near my office, and we had exchanged small talk for months without it ever going anywhere. But after the trial, something changed. I started opening up to her, telling her about my family, about the lawsuit, about everything. She listened without trying to fix me, without offering advice I did not ask for. She just listened. Our friendship deepened into something more. It was slow and gentle, nothing like the dramatic romances you see in movies. But it was real. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly saw me for who I was. A year passed. I found myself standing in front of my house again, the same spot where I had stood when I first received that lawsuit. But everything felt different now. The weight I'd carried for so long was finally lifting. I thought about my parents, about Dylan. I did not hate them anymore. I just felt sad for them. Sad for the relationships we could have had. Sad for the family we might have been if things had been different. But I also understood something important. Family is not just about blood. Family is about the people who choose to love you, who show up for you, who see you for who you are. And by that definition, I had built a new family. Marcus, Sarah, my therapist, my friends. People who cared about me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Forgiveness, I learned, does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending the hurt never happened. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. It is about choosing peace over bitterness, freedom over chains. I still have my grandmother's letter. I keep it in a frame on my bedside table, a reminder of the one person who loved me unconditionally from the very beginning. Sometimes when life gets hard, I read her words again and remember that I was always enough. I just needed to believe it myself. If you are out there watching this feeling unloved, unseen, wondering if you will ever be good enough, let me tell you something. You already are. Some people are just too blind to see it, and that is their loss, not yours. I walked back into my house that evening, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt like I was truly home. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up against your own family to protect yourself? How did you find the strength to do it? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I know your experiences can help someone else who might be going through something similar. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people who need to hear these messages. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss future stories. Share this video with someone who might need it today. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community. I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself, the wisdom to know your worth, and the peace that comes from finally letting go. Until next time, take care of yourselves.